Randy, I want to turn to an article that you wrote. This is about investment choice with defined contribution plans. And the point that you make in this is that it's risky from a legal perspective and a financial performance perspective. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So a lot of people seem to think, or a lot of employers seem to think, that if I give employees choice and then they screw up their financial planning for the future, that's their problem, not mine. Wrong. Once you give choice, then you've got a whole host of fiduciary duties that come into play. So if I don't give any choice, my only duty is to manage reasonably the assets that are under my control. And my employees will then get whatever that performance results in their accounts in the DC plan. But once I give choice, wow, now I've got to think about, am I giving enough choice that will respond to what the members need to achieve their own personal goals? Do I understand what the risk tolerances are of my members? Do my members understand their own risk tolerances? So now I have a duty to sort of educate them about what their risk tolerances are. And then I've got a duty to educate them about the risk characteristics of the choices that they have so that they're able to go away and match up those investment choices with their own personal risk tolerances. And then I've got to make sure that each of the funds I'm not paying too much for, because there's been lawsuits around employers inadvertently getting consumer funds rather than, at retail rates rather than wholesale rate funds, if I can put it that way, that are in their plans, or the costs start to creep up and the employer has sort of been asleep at the monitoring switch and hasn't noticed that, and they get sued about that. So they need to monitor that. They need to monitor the communication that's going from the managers directly to their employees, where they put those in place to make sure that those aren't overstating things or overselling or selling them other products that maybe their members don't really need or want, or the employer didn't know was going on. So there's all kinds of duties. There's something called the Canadian Association of Pension Supervisory Authorities, and they publish guidelines. And one of the guidelines is about member choice defined contribution plans. And everybody seems to think that guideline applies to all defined contribution plans. But if you read, I think it's either the first paragraph or the second paragraph, it says, it's only if you're giving two or more choices to members in your DC plan that you need to comply with this guideline. Otherwise, all you got to do is just manage things reasonably. So yeah, there's a lot more legal risk associated with giving choice.
So Randy, this is very interesting because you mentioned the financial education piece. I have seen personally, time and time again, that employees don't understand what they're investing in or even how to create a portfolio. And a lot of times they're not financially educated. So what sort of legal obligation then does a sponsor have? Is it enough to say, here's a 30-page handout on how your pension plans work, here's a list of funds, see you later?
No. Of course, they need to do a bit more than that. Yeah. But the reality is that most of the people who are in DC plans, they don't make a choice. Something like 80% of people just go into the fund that is selected as the default for members who don't make choices or who don't want to make choices. So they're not actively managing their plan. They're just going into what the employer has set as the default. And in recent years, those target date or target funds that you mentioned earlier, they tend to be the default. So if I'm in an age category of 40 to 45, I'm going to go into the 40 to 45 target date fund as my default if I don't give the employer any instructions. Now, that doesn't relieve the employer from going back and figuring out why they didn't get any instructions from this person, because maybe that got lost in the mail or something. So they still have a fiduciary duty to follow up and not just assume that the person is in the default fund because they want to be.
Yeah, we only have about 45 seconds for the break, but also with the flexibility, there is the unintended consequences, and that is a lot of employers are not contributing enough and aren't experts at investing.
Yep. I mean, it takes a lot. In order to replace the income you have now in retirement and to maintain your standard of living, you pretty much need to be saving about 18% of your earnings if you're a middle or high income earner. And if you're not saving that much, then you better lower your expectations for retirement.
Right.
If you are a lower income worker, because of our social programs and other sorts of things, you probably don't have to save as much.
Okay.
But it's more aimed at middle and upper income earners. 18%, good rule
Right.
of thumb. That's what I need to say.